This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of March 7th, 2016. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like when you watch this video, just check out the description below this video where you'll find links to download each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is Morvi, which is a Bootstrap HTML portfolio theme. This is a fully responsive website theme using the Bootstrap responsive framework as the backbone for it. So Bootstrap is super full featured and fairly easy to use, especially if you've used it previously. So it's really good that this happens to use that if you're looking for something that has a ton of different options for you to go in and customize. And this also does not use a CMS like WordPress. So at least basic website coding knowledge will be really helpful for you when you go in here and want to customize this website to really reflect what you're doing. And the overall theme of this website is pretty much focused around portfolio items, although the stylistic look to me seems a lot more businessy than perhaps a design firm. And businessy probably isn't the best term, but in general, it feels a bit more corporate to me than perhaps something that's very focused on your personal design works or something like that. Although I could certainly see this being rearranged a little bit to be a bit more personalized for an individual designer, if that's how you want to go in here and use this. So this is the first page, and there are 3 different basic homepage layouts to choose from, kind of depending on what works best for you or your business. So feel free to pick from one of these 3 different ones. And it's really easy to see which is which by going to the home tab and just clicking on 1, 2, or 3. And all these are included inside the download as well. So as you can see here, there are a few different layouts to choose from, and I'll quickly just click on something from this Our Work section, which would be your portfolio. Just show it opens up a light box right here to display your image a little bit larger, and then there's room for some type underneath it as well as a tweet button. And under pages here, there's a few different pages you can check out, like About. So this is the About page where you can kind of talk about yourself. There's some animated bars going on right here that can show what you or your business does. And then there's also a team section for different team members where you can display them and kind of show off your team members. And below that, we have a standardized testimonial and client section, and then a few different tabs to display different things as you see fit. There's a services page where you can kind of call out to what you or your business does. There's also a blog built in, so this is a single blog, so nice and large images here, and then plenty of room for type underneath of it. And then you can kind of see an interesting comment section below it with a nice cascading sort of style here. So these below it would perhaps be replied, which is a nice visual way to delineate how that happens. And right here below that is the comment form. And very quickly, the footer has an About, a latest news, which would probably be most recent to posted things, all the tags you've been using right here, as well as a contact us section. I'm going to click on the portfolio right here quick, so you can see there's like 4 column, 3 column, 2 column, or different options overall for the way you want your portfolio to display. So this is the 4 column one right here, but they all work fairly similar. Feel free to go in here and check these out on your own. If you click on this little magnifying glass, you just get a bigger image like before. And then there's also a link that you could use to link people off to something else, a different page on this website perhaps, or to a portfolio based website like Behance or Dribbble. There's shortcodes, which are just a way of showing different ways to achieve things. So you could look at this page to pull the code from it to achieve these different things like tabs or toggle boxes like this right here. There's also some basic formatting for type like block quotes or information blocks. Here's a tab for the blog, but we've already seen that, so I'm not going to do that again. And then the contact page, which brings up a nice map right here that you could set to be for your location, and then a standardized contact form with message, subject, name, and email, and then some general info off to the right of that. So that's it for this theme. It's a fairly robust theme in terms of the amount of different page styles they have and different layout options you can choose from. And once again, it's using the Bootstrap responsive framework, so it's going to look good on no matter what kind of device you're looking at it on, which is always a really important thing to consider. So if you like this theme and you think you'll have some use for it, just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. Next up is Natural Pattern with Birds. This is a pretty straightforward item, as it is an EPS file with this seamlessly repeating pattern of some birds, and they also include this as a JPEG as well in case you prefer to use it that way. So I'll very quickly repeat this off to the side right here so you can see how it looks as it's actually repeated, and just to show that it does repeat very well. And overall, the style of this does remind me a lot of a textile pattern, so I think that is a potential really strong use for this. It also looks like I forgot to drag off the background on a couple of these, so just make sure you grab the background as well as you go ahead and repeat this to be larger. But that accident actually does show too that if you don't pull the background off, it does work with a white background as well. So consider changing the color of the background if you want to do that, or removing it altogether to get the overall look that you're trying to achieve with this. But overall, I quite like this. I think the illustration style is good. And there's also some different styles taken here, like the way this branch is illustrated versus the much more simplified version of these leaves. So you could of course use this as a seamless repeating pattern or even a singular piece of art if you want to do like that. Otherwise, you can ungroup it And I found it's easiest to ungroup this by clicking on one of the edges right here and then right-clicking ungroup, which will allow you to pull off individual elements like these birds right here in case you want to use just those, or perhaps you want to drag the bird and the branch it's on. So it's really easy to go in there and do that and use individual vector elements if that's something you want to do using the EPS version. But that's it for this item. I think it's a pretty darn cool one. If you've been on the hunt for some nature and bird themed illustrations, or perhaps even seamless repeats like this one, then this one will be perfect for you. Just be sure to grab it this week. Next we have Just Good Textures Volume 1 Ink Washes. This is a set of 20 different textures and is provided in a ton of different formats, including bitmap, Photoshop brushes, JPEGs, as well as this Photoshop file that I have opened up right here. And this will be not quite completely accurate because this bottom part does take up a bit of space. But if I go to image size, this is 2100 pixels wide by about 3300 pixels high. So it should be big enough to apply over most things that you're going to be working on. And this is actually a super high quality set. So I'm just going to open up this folder quick and go through each one of these 20 different ink washes fairly closely. But first, I'll zoom in pretty close here until I get to 100%, which is right here, so you can see how these textures look up close. So they look pretty darn sharp, and there is a lot of contrast and variation in the amount of texture that's applied here. And I should note too, these are fully transparent, so if I turn off that background, you can see that these should be very easy to apply to your work, especially if you're ending up using this Photoshop file right here. So I'm going to zoom back out though to see the whole thing here and start just scrolling through these 20 different versions of textures. And I think that these are all pretty unique in the way they look, at least as far as I've seen when I went through this. So there is a lot of variety and versatility throughout the set. Ones like this are just really cool looking. They have a really neat effect that I'm not totally sure how they created, but the end result should be a lot of fun to play around with and apply to different objects if you want to go in there and do that. And especially working with ones like this that do have a transparent background, that should be nice and easy for you to do. And I'll very quickly at the end of this show you how you can do that inside Photoshop without worrying too much or actually destroying your work, because you can very easily apply these using a mask, so you could then remove them at any time and not have to worry about accidentally overwriting your work or deleting something that you really don't want to delete. So just a few more left here, but as you saw going through this entire list, there was a nice selection of textures here. I think overall this is a super high quality texture pack with a lot of variety in terms of the way these look. I mean, they all have a very similar feel, but at the same time, the amount of texture covering the work and the overall patterns the textures created were a lot different from one another. So I think that's a really cool thing. So very quickly here, I'm just going to draw a basic shape on its own layer so we can apply a texture over it just to show how to do this in Photoshop really fast. So once you find a texture you like let's say you like the first one the most, you don't have to even have it turned on, but just hold down Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and then click on the little thumbnail of that particular texture, which will select it. And then you can go ahead and click on the objects layer that you want to apply the texture to. And at the bottom here, there's a rectangle with a circle in the middle of it that says apply a layer mask when you hover over it. So just click that and it will go ahead here and apply that texture onto the object you made. I'm going to set this background as white really quick so you can see this a little bit better. So if I zoom in right here, you can see that it did apply that texture. And if I turn off the background, it's also fully transparent, so it will show what is ever behind it. And also if you click on the texture mask you just created itself and hit Control I on a PC or Command I on a Mac, it'll invert that texture, which will give you a little bit more versatility in terms of all these textures. So each texture will have basically two different distinct looks depending on if you invert it or not. And then of course, if you don't want to use this texture, you can either click on it and hit the garbage can icon to delete it, or hold down Shift and click the texture, which will go ahead and disable that. But that's it for this pack. I actually think it's a super high quality texture pack with a lot of really good stuff in it. So this one is a definite recommendation for me. But if you like these textures and you have some projects in mind that you want to use them on, be sure to grab this one this week. Next up is Graphique Pro Next, which is a font. This font is provided in OpenType font format, and I have it opened up inside Adobe Illustrator here to show it. So it only includes uppercase letters as shown right here up at the top, so we can look at those first. So as you can see on this one, it does have a singular fill for the letters, and then a 3D extruded style background to each one of those letters that creates sort of a shadow effect. So I'll just quickly scroll through all the individual letters here so you can really see how those look. So overall, a fairly basic looking sans serif font, but the included 3D extrude right here really does set that apart. And it does include all the numbers 0 through 9 shown right here, and then actually quite a few different special characters. So I'll quickly highlight this, go to type and then glyphs near the top here, and then I'll scroll through here so you can kind of see what to expect in this set. So there are a lot of accented letters, so if you're using a Latin-based language outside of English, this will be super helpful for you. So as you can see right here, that was all the accented marks, so it's a very complete listing right there. And there's also some additional things like fractionals and then a bunch of different other special characters. So be sure to check out the entire glyph set if you're using this and you're looking for something you can't easily find. That's always a great way to go about and do it. So I typed up free goods roundup right here into a sentence. You can see how that looks typed out. The stock kerning looks really solid, as well as the spacing between the words themselves. So I think this one should be a fairly easy one to just type out, and it will be in a pretty usable state to begin with. And I typed this at the bottom right here fairly small, just to show you that this font doesn't really hold up all that great when used really small because of this 3D extrude that is applied to it. So I would definitely use this particular font as a display font, but that's it for this font. If you like this font and you think you'll have some use out of it, perhaps you have some projects in mind that you want to give a very handcrafted look to them as far as a little bit older vintage style of letter goes that at least this 3D extrude gives me, then just be sure to pick this font up this week while it's still free. Next up is branding material MockUp. This is a mockup set for Adobe Photoshop, and I'll quickly show the size of this. So image size, and this one is 3000 by 1800 pixels high, which should be plenty big for pretty much anything on the web that you want to use this on. So as you can see right here, it includes an iPad with some mugs, as well as some business cards, and then some pencils off to the side here. And up at the top here, there's a folder that says your logo and shapes. And something to note with this particular mockup set is it doesn't automatically sort of scale and transform these different objects to fit onto your objects. So especially on something like the iPad right here or these business cards, you will have to transform them, or however you choose to do so, make sure the perspective lines up correctly, as these included objects are really here for display only and aren't smart objects that will apply this effect for you. But they did include a help grid folder that if you turn it on, it overlays grids on top of things like these cards. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier for you to make sure the perspective lines up the way it should in order to match the items in question. And they did include a smart object layer right here that says set your color theme. So if you double click on that, it'll open up a new window here with some different color themes to pick. I did notice for whatever reason it takes a long time for the color to show up after I turn it on. That could just be my Photoshop version though, but once it does, you can find a color that you think works the best for whatever objects you're trying to display here for your particular mockup. Then hit Control S on a PC or Command S on a Mac to save it, and then close this window. And as you can see, it instantly applies to the background here and does a nice job of doing so. But that's really it for this one. It's a pretty straightforward mockup set. So if this looks like something that'll be helpful to you, just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. And last up, we have a set of natural logos. This is a collection of 16 different badges or labels provided in EPS format. So I have it opened up inside Illustrator here to show it. So the first thing to note with this particular set is that all the type in it is outlined. So you will have to go in and replace the type unless perhaps you're using them exactly as they say, for example, fresh food or yoga. So if your use case happens to be exactly what it already says, then you're pretty well set. But otherwise, I'd recommend just ungrouping these by clicking them, right-clicking them, and then ungrouping until you get that particular item. And then you can go ahead and just ungroup that item itself, and then select the type, delete it, and then replace it with your own. Should be fairly easy to go in there and do that. Just pick a font that you think works well with these particular styles. And of course, you can ungroup these and use just some of the leaves, or perhaps if you really like these wreath style designs around it, you could then hover over this entire wreath set, for example, and just group up that particular wreath and then use that on its own, perhaps with an illustration in the middle, or this could be left by itself or replaced with your own type. You can also feel free to use these very desaturated color palettes in case you like those as well, or you could of course completely redo the colors if that's something you want to do as well. So perhaps if you want to use all the yellows in a slightly different version of yellow, you can just click on that using the white arrow to select just that particular yellow, and then go to select, same, and then fill color, which will select all of that yellow throughout this entire thing. So if I want to make this perhaps a really bright yellow, I can go in there and do that very quickly, and it went ahead and replaced it everywhere. In this case, that didn't look too good, but you get the general idea of how easy it is to replace colors across this entire set. But that's really it for this one. It's fairly straightforward in its overall use. There's a lot of different vectors to pick from and use. Just keep in mind that the type is not live, so if the word itself doesn't say what you want it to say, you'll have to go in and replace that. But that really shouldn't be too much work for you to go in there and do. But if you like these labels and you think you'll get some use out of them, just be sure to grab this pack this week while it's still free. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you thought might be useful for you, just check out the description below this video where you will find a link to download it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite. And if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday till you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thanks for watching.